by for a very important announcement. Germany has invaded Poland and has bombed many towns.
O godzinie 5 minut 40 oddziały niemieckie przekroczyły granicę polską w ramach paktu o nieagresji.
Mal auf unserem eigenen Territorium auch mit der regulären Soldaten geschossen.
It goes without saying that there has been no conflict more devastating in the history of humanity than the Second World War. Around 70 million people lost their lives, and the atrocities committed by all sides marked a turning point in our history. Even more than 8 decades after its end, this conflict continues to show us its scars, both visible and hidden, throughout the world. In the present day, the echoes of this war continue to resonate through incredible discoveries that have uncovered forgotten stories, hidden crimes, and personal tragedies. From mass graves discovered in remote locations, to the remains of soldiers unearthed where deadly battles were once fought, and evidence of inhumane experiments found in secret locations. These 21st century discoveries, known as the last vestiges of a dark period, allow us to continue learning and unraveling more about this period, while forcing us to confront the past and reflect on its legacy. Today, I invite you to join me in exploring 7 of the most disturbing recent discoveries related to World War II, each one, of course, treated with the personal and tragic character that reflects the magnitude of the atrocities and human sacrifice. Number 7. Human remains found in the wolf's lair. In February 2024, a group of amateur archaeologists and historians from the Leitebra Foundation made a disturbing discovery at the Wolf's Lair, one of Adolf Hitler's main headquarters during the war. Beneath the floor of the residence of Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, located in the first security zone, 5 human skeletons without hands or feet were discovered. This discovery, reported by international media outlets such as The Guardian, National Geographic and Reuters, has raised questions about the identity of these individuals and the circumstances surrounding their deaths. The Wolf's Lair, built in 1941 in what was then the region of East Prussia, was a strategic center where Hitler and his generals planned key operations on the Eastern Front. It is worth mentioning that it was here that the assassination attempt against the Führer was carried out on the 20th of July, 1944. The remains were found in what appeared to be an old bathroom under Göring's house, a few centimeters above the floor during an excavation authorized by the Polish authorities. The skeletons belonged to 3 adults, a teenager and a baby, all laid out in the same direction, with no traces of clothing or belongings to help identify them. According to experts, the absence of hands and feet could be due to natural decomposition or mutilation, although the causes are still under investigation. Polish authorities, in collaboration with forensic experts, began an analysis to determine the age, sex, and the possible causes of death. According to some media reports, and although this is a possibility that still needs to be evaluated, the skeletons could date back to the interwar period, but it cannot be ruled out that they are related to prisoners of war, forced laborers, or victims of the German occupation. The lack of historical records complicates identification, but the case has reignited interest in exploring the historical mysteries of the Wolf's Lair and this historic region. Number 6. The pilot who was found in the ice 63 years after his disappearance. In October 2005, the discovery of the frozen remains of aviation cadet Leo Arvid Mustonen, a Finnish-American soldier who died on 18 November 1942 during a training flight, closed an unexpected chapter in a disappearance that had remained hidden for 63 years in the heights of the Sierra Nevada. The son of Finnish immigrants, Mustonen, who was just 22 years old at the time of his death, had enlisted in the Army during his final year of high school. As a U.S. Air Force cadet, he was assigned to Mather Air Force Base in Sacramento, California, where he trained for navigation missions. On 18 November 1942, Mustonen was part of the crew of a Beechcraft AT-7 Navigator, commanded by Second Lieutenant William A. Gamba, alongside cadets Ernest G. Munn and John M. Mortensen. During a routine navigation flight that took off at 8:30 a.m., heading south, the plane crashed into Mount Mendel, a peak located in Kings Canyon National Park, California. Although it could not be determined with certainty, it is believed that the tragic outcome may have been due to a storm and poor visibility, which caused the aircraft to crash into Mount Mendel approximately 91 meters below its summit, which rises to 4,179 meters. Shortly afterwards, the US Air Force sent patrols to locate the exact crash site, but to no avail. It was not until 5 years later, in 1947, that a hiker stumbled upon the wreckage of the plane on the Darwin Glacier, recovering fragments of frozen tissue from Cadet Mortensen among the remains, along with his identification tags. However, the bodies of the other airmen could not be found. Decades later, in October 2005, two climbers on the Mendel Glacier spotted a head and arms emerging from the ice, along with what they identified as a World War II-era uniform and an unopened parachute. The remains, preserved by the cold in a mummified state, were removed and transferred to Hickam Air Force Base in Oahu, Hawaii, home to the Army's Forensic Anthropology Laboratory. There, an autopsy confirmed that they did indeed belong to Mustonen, thanks to mitochondrial DNA analysis compared with samples from relatives. Additionally, it was reported that his death was instantaneous, given the severity of the injuries to the body. Finally, on 24 March 2006, he was buried with military honors at Evergreen Cemetery in Brainerd, Minnesota. The following year, in August 2007, another body was located on the same glacier and identified in March 2008 through mitochondrial DNA and forensic testing as that of his companion Ernest G. Munn. Like Mustonen, he was also given a dignified burial in his home state of Ohio. 3 of the 4 airmen who disappeared that day have been identified. However, the remains of Second Lieutenant William Gamba have never been found, and an expedition planned for 2009 was cancelled due to lack of funds. Number 5. The Forgotten Victims of Okinawa. For more than 20 years, Japanese volunteer Takamatsu Gushiken has led an extraordinary effort to recover the remains of more than 1,400 people from the caves of Itamen on the island of Okinawa, linked to the battle of the same name that took place in the final stages of the Second World War. These discoveries, which gained international attention in 2024, are among the most significant in terms of scale, but also among the most tragic due to the difficulty in identifying the victims. The Battle of Okinawa, fought between April and June 1945, was one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific theater of the war between Japan and the United States, with estimates of more than 100,000 deaths, including Japanese soldiers, American soldiers, and Okinawan civilians. The caves in Itomen, used as shelters, became mass graves when fighting and bombing collapsed the entrances. Mr. Gushiken says he began his search in 2003, motivated by a desire to give the victims a proper burial. According to a report by independent journalist Johnny Harris, he has documented each find in a red notebook, noting the location and details of the remains. But despite recovering more than 1,400 remains, only 6 have been identified through DNA testing due to the degradation of the bones and the lack of family records. Since 2016, Japan's Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare has been supporting this initiative by inviting potential relatives to submit DNA analysis requests. Another particularly striking detail is that most of the remains found are those of civilians, many of them women and children, reflecting the devastation suffered by the local population during the bloody battle. These discoveries are tragic in themselves, given the scale of the losses and the image of entire families trapped in caves, forgotten there for decades. Mr. Gushikan's efforts seek to close family chapters and preserve Okinawa's memory as a reminder of the cost of war. At 71, he continues his work, aware that every remains tell a story. Number 4. An echo from Stalingrad emerges in Volgograd.
Война не окончена, пока не похоронен последний солдат. И спустя 71 год на Сталинградской земле под землей строители обнаруживают не только не разорвавшиеся бомбы, но и целые братские могилы.
In September 2018, one of the most chilling discoveries in recent years was made, notable for its magnitude. The events took place on the 25th of that month in the urban settlement of Angarsky, on the western outskirts of Volgograd, formerly Stalingrad, the name par excellence of the bloodiest battle in human history. That day, while installing a water pipe near a residential area, utility workers stumbled upon what at first glance appeared to be a mass grave from the Second World War. According to local reports, finding mass graves from the war is not unusual, especially in Volgograd, where it is estimated that between 3 and 4 are discovered each year. But what the workers found this time was not a simple mass grave. During the excavations, they came across a huge pit about 130 meters long, 7 meters wide, and 2 meters deep, containing hundreds of bodies. They immediately alerted the authorities, who, following protocol, sent a team of military archaeologists to inspect the site and the remains. After a thorough investigation, the team identified the site as a mass grave containing the remains of 1,837 German soldiers who died between the winter of 1942 and 1943 after the Sixth Army, to which they belonged, was completely surrounded by Soviet troops. Once the team determined that no grenades or unexploded ammunition had been found, as initially suggested, the remains were exhumed for analysis by the German War Graves Commission in an attempt to identify some of the German soldiers found here. During this process, it was observed that the bodies showed signs of death from starvation, cold, and non-lethal wounds, indicating that their deaths were not due to direct combat during the battle. In addition, identification tags were found on approximately 20% of the bodies, as well as bottles, keys, belt buckles, a gas mask, and horses' remains. After all the necessary work had been carried out by the Commission and the Russian authorities, the remains were reburied on the 12th of September 2019 at the German War Cemetery in Rososhka, 37 kilometers from Volgograd, which is maintained by the German Commission and is the final resting place of some 65,000 German soldiers who lost their lives in the battle. In a military ceremony attended by more than 50 relatives who traveled from Germany, obviously of the soldiers who could be identified, this act allowed them to close a painful chapter in their lives after almost 75 years. Number 3. Mass grave found in the Valley of Death in Chojnica. In August 2021, a team of Polish archaeologists from the Institute of National Remembrance made a shocking discovery in a wooded area in the Pomerania region of northern Poland. A mass grave containing the remains of approximately 500 individuals. This finding, reported on 18 August by the science news website Live Science, highlighted one of the darkest episodes of the German occupation of Poland, known as the Pomeranian Crime of 1939. During the early months of World War II, German occupation authorities, as part of a premeditated plan to Germanize the western regions of occupied Poland, carried out a series of mass murders of Polish civilians, intellectuals, priests, and Jews in a general operation codenamed Intelligence Action. Pomerania became a convenient execution site due to its dense forests, where most of the victims were buried in makeshift graves, while the perpetrators attempted to cover up the evidence by destroying numerous records, as pointed out by Polish historians and researchers such as Włodzimierz Jastrzębski, Kazimierz Ostrowski, and Maria Wardzyńska. While it remains difficult to determine the exact number of victims in Pomerania, and estimates vary considerably, it is estimated that between 20,000 and 40,000 people were victims of the Pomeranian crime. The excavations in which these human remains were found are located in the so-called Valley of Death of Chojnice, more specifically in the Igielski forests on the outskirts of the city. To confirm that the remains date from the period between 1939 and 1945, experts from the Institute of National Remembrance, the organization that led the investigation into the case, used advanced forensic techniques such as osteological studies. The findings also revealed some significant details about the bodies, such as bullet holes in the head and fragments of personal items, such as crosses and medals, which according to the Institute itself, have helped to identify some of the victims, not to mention the significant number of bullet casings found at the exhumation site. Overall, this important discovery in Chojnice has allowed further progress to be made in identifying the victims of the German occupation, although many of them remain unidentified. Since then, archaeological investigations have continued, with new discoveries in the area between 2022 and 2023, bringing the total number of bodies found to over 700 in September 2024, of which only 120 have been identified. On 2 September 2024, a state funeral was held in Chojnice, in the minor basilica of St. John the Baptist, where the remains of these more than 700 people executed in the Valley of Death were laid to rest in 188 coffins. After the liturgy, those in attendance accompanied the remains to a grave located in a plot at the Cemetery of Victims of German Crimes in Chojnice, where the final burial took place. Number 2. The grave of a pilot who flew in his coffin. In March 2017, an extraordinary discovery on a farm in Birkelse, northern Denmark, revealed the remains of a Messerschmitt Bf 109 aircraft. This discovery, reported by BBC News on 7 March 2017, was made by Daniel Rom Christiansen, a 14-year-old schoolboy who, with the help of his father, was testing a metal detector on a family field as part of a school project. To their surprise, they struck gold, an almost perfectly preserved Messerschmitt Bf 109, the Luftwaffe's flagship fighter, of which more than 32,000 were manufactured before and during the war. But that wasn't all. The aircraft, believed to have crashed in October 1944, possibly due to aerial combat or mechanical failure, also contained the remains of the pilot, identified after forensic analysis as Hans Wunderlich. Born on 22 July 1925 and aged 19 at the time of his death, he was found with his personal documents, including a Luftwaffe diary and a watch with his initials, which facilitated his identification. The subsequent excavation was led by the North Jutland Historical Museum, which used archaeological techniques to preserve the site. The human remains, well preserved thanks to the moisture in the soil, were analysed in Copenhagen, where Wunderlich's identity was finally confirmed through German military records. Following identification, his remains were buried in a German military cemetery in Denmark. What makes this particular discovery special and remarkable is the incredible preservation of the remains, thanks to the damp soil in the area, which created a low-oxygen environment that slowed bacterial decomposition and tissue degradation. This allowed the skeletal remains, along with organic materials such as the diary and watch, to remain in good condition after 73 years. Number 1. Discovery of Bacillus anthracis at a testing ground of Unit 731. In 2024, Chinese researchers from the Military Science Academy in Beijing announced a discovery that sheds new light on one of the darkest chapters of the Second World War. On the grounds of a former Unit 731 test site located in Anda County, Heilongjiang Province, they detected Bacillus anthracis, the bacterium responsible for anthrax. The research was published by the team at the end of last year in the journal Emerging Infectious Diseases, providing new and solid scientific evidence of the biological weapons experiments carried out by the Imperial Japanese Army between 1937 and 1945 during the occupation of China. As is well known, Unit 731, led by Dr. Shiro Ishii, was a secret biological research program operating under the guise of an epidemic prevention and water purification department. In reality, its facilities in Manchuria, a Chinese territory occupied by Japan, housed laboratories where prisoners, mainly Chinese, but also Koreans, Soviets, and other prisoners of war, were infected with deadly diseases such as anthrax, plague, and cholera. It is estimated that between 3,000 and 12,000 people died during these experiments, many of whom were dissected alive without anesthesia, according to testimonies and historical evidence gathered from various sources. The discovery was made during excavations at the Anda testing ground, built in 1941 as one of the largest open-air experimentation centers of Unit 731. Researchers used advanced techniques to analyze soil samples, detecting significant traces of Bacillus anthracis. According to another article published in 2024, this time by the Heilongjiang Institute of Cultural Relics and Archaeology, the bacteria found at the site matched the strains used in the experiments described by Hideo Sakakibara, Japanese commander of the 162nd Manchuria Unit, the largest of the 4 sub-units of the Unit 731, established in Lingkou County, about 510 kilometers east of Anda County. In his testimony before a special military court in Shenyang in 1956, Sakakibara recalled seeing personnel under his command conducting bacteriological tests by detonating anthrax bombs at close range on people tied to wooden posts. Overall, this discovery not only reveals the atrocities committed by Unit 731, but also reignites the debate over Japan's historical responsibility. Although the Tokyo High Court only recognized the existence of these practices in 2005, the victims and their families are still seeking justice. Furthermore, this new finding, backed by modern science, serves as a stark reminder of the horrors of biological warfare and its lasting impact on subsequent relations between China and Japan.
Wir sind des Geiers schwarzer Haufen.
This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
That's the tale of a Europe in turmoil.
Upon this battle depends the survival of civilization.